Dorlsh has a question and says, is there any extra biblical evidence for the census in Luke 2? I heard it would be a pretty dumb idea to send people to their place of birth if you later wanted them to pay taxes from their current home. Um, that might sound dumb. I mean, okay, so let's take the second part of your question first. Oh, first, I'll just mention this. This is the census that Luke says is in the time of Quirinius, when Quirinius was governor. And at least that's how many translations put it. And there's the timeline that Luke's very careful about his timeline. He's of all the gospels and in the book of Acts as well, he's very careful to offer, like, in the 15th year of Tiberius this happened. He'll give really good details about times, who was ruling at that time. He's more of a historian in the way that he approaches how he records things in Luke and Acts. But he mentions that when the travel from Nazareth down to Bethlehem happened, that this was because of a census where the Roman government was like, hey, go back to your homeland. And I'll just say this, to the second part of your question, there's no real problem with saying that people would go to the place of their birth. It doesn't mean what, like, I've heard some cynics say, that they had to go to the place of their ancient ancestors' birth. It says that, they may have gone to the place of their own birth. Like, this could help, because here's the deal. As they're being logged and they're paying taxes, they're paying a census tax. If I'm in Nazareth, I could say, oh, well, I'm from Bethlehem. I already paid in Bethlehem. And it just is a way of tax dodging. And so I'm just giving you a hypothesis here. I don't know of a historical problem with asking people to move to their home location to pay a tax. Now, maybe there was another option on the table. If they paid extra, they didn't have to, or I don't know. But I don't see the historical problem there. It might sound dumb, but lots of policies sound dumb when you're not in the government, you're not actually enforcing them, and you don't know the reasons why they were put there. But the real issue with this census of Quirinius, which is why you asked, is there extra biblical evidence for it, is that in Luke, it says there was a census in the time of Quirinius, or it may say that. We'll get to that in a second. But in Josephus, a first century historian, he shows that Quirinius was not governor at the time when Luke says this. Right? The timeline of Luke is pretty clear, and Josephus shows that Quirinius was not governor during that time. Now, there's a lot of people who've done a lot of work on this. Craig Blomberg has a book where he talks about it in some detail. He has a book on the reliability of the scriptures, and I can't remember the name of it. Craig Blomberg, though, and he has a little section. I think it's towards the end of the appendix or something like that on the census of Quirinius. It might be in the appendix. You'll find it though in the book, and he talks about several different things here. And there's two things. There's like 5 things to recognize. Well, first, let's recognize this. There's literally just one historical source versus one other historical source, Luke versus Josephus. Now, Josephus so we don't have like this mountain of history against Luke here. We have one guy supposedly against Luke. So the question is, who do you go with? Now, a lot of non-Christians will default go with Josephus. They just will. And a lot of Christians will default go with Luke. Right? Well, if you're a Christian and you believe the Bible is the inspired word of God, it makes sense to go with Luke. Well, obviously Luke is right, Josephus is wrong there. That's not irrational to say that. But it's hard to say that to a non-believer who doesn't believe that the Bible is God's inspired word. So then you've just got 2 historical sources to analyze. And we could look at Luke and say, well, Luke is actually remarkably good as a historian. There's a book somewhere on my bookshelf on this topic about the Acts in its setting in ancient history. Is it Beckwith who wrote it? I can't remember right now. Anyway, Acts and Luke and Acts and like all the incredible historical data that's in there that's actually very accurate. Luke talks about detailed things like the way that shipping would work, like in his recounting of Paul and his shipwrecking and stuff like that. The ship lines, the actual journey paths that they would take, all this stuff is really detailed and very accurate. So Luke's pretty reliable. How about Josephus? Josephus, historians have said, is reliable when it comes to things he witnessed himself. He actually sometimes he says some fanciful stuff, right? Like he's embellishing things, but he's more reliable when it was things that happened while he was alive. When you go back before he was alive, Josephus tends to become less reliable. This makes sense. He wasn't there. He's relying on other sources more. And the census of Quirinius would have been before Josephus was alive. Could Josephus have been mistaken? It's possible. Another way out of this in Luke 2 is to just look at the Greek. And I think this is where Craig Blomberg leans. Here's the verse. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. That's the debate. Wait, but Josephus shows that Quirinius wasn't governor of Syria during this time. Well, this word when could also be translated before, because, words do double and triple duty, and certain words do. And this particular word in the Greek, it does do double and triple duty. It's an entirely fair, and I mean this is a safe way to deal with the issue. It's a fair way to say, hey, this was before Quirinius was governor of Syria. So perhaps there is another census in the time of Quirinius at a later time, and Luke is saying this happened before that. That's a fair translation of the Greek, whereas the English removes that. The word when here in the English, it removes that. So this is why there's a footnote. See the little number 1 here? There's a footnote here in the ESV that says, or this was before, right, the time of Quirinius. So they're acknowledging it can be translated either way. So I'm saying it could be that Josephus is wrong. Could be that Quirinius was, another option is Quirinius was governor more than once. Josephus talks about him being governor later. Maybe he was governor earlier as well. Lots of politicians come in and out of offices. This is not that uncommon. Or Luke isn't even claiming that Quirinius was first. Or some just say the tiebreaker between Luke and Josephus is Luke, not Josephus, because he's not as reliable when it comes to those time periods. There's more that can be said on this. I'm not up on the most recent research on this topic, so I can't share that with you. One of these days I'll do that.